Welcome, Reuben here from the Native Instruments blog, the Samplecast and many other music tech videos. In this track breakdown, I'm going to be having a look at how I put together this short synth cue that's basically one huge tribute to early 1980s epic sci-fi soundtracks. So think John Carpenter and Vangelis, just a bit more melodic. To pull this off, I'm using synths and plugin effects from developer Yuhi. The vintage modelling here is just perfect for this kind of sound. Here's a little bit of the track, and I'll play it again in full at the end of the video. Hopefully you can hear what kind of vibe I'm going for here. The synths I'm using are Yuhi's Diva, Repro 1 and Repro 5, and also 4 of their versatile plugin effects, including their Bucket Brigade delay called Color Copy, Spring Reverb Twang Strom, Satin, which is a tape machine emulation with a really lush analog tape sound, and Presswork, which is their dynamics processing toolkit. I'm using Logic here, but these instruments and effects can be loaded in any DAW. Since Yuhi is an NKS partner and these plugins are all NKS ready, that means you can also load them within Native Instruments Complete Control software for easy pre-mapped parameters that can be adjusted with any MIDI controller. So let's break the track down and I'll show you how I programmed the synths and applied the effects. This cue is really all about layering and using LFO and modulation controls to keep the synth oscillators and filters moving throughout the track. This creates an organic sound. So you'll seldom see a MIDI track without some kind of mod wheel information, either controlling filter cutoff, vibrato or another parameter. This is the first track and I'm starting off by keeping things very simple with some big pads from Diva, chosen from the Dream Synth preset menu. So Diva is Yuhi's synth powerhouse, and one of the most awesome aspects of this synth is that it doesn't set out to replicate just one vintage synth. It actually contains modelled oscillators, filters and envelopes from 5 decades worth of classic machines. So you can recreate classic hardware or design your own synth. Let me demo that, swapping the different modules in and out, and watch the scope screen which shows what the waveform looks like. Let's change the oscillator modelling module. Or you can swap out the filter modules from some classic vintage units. Use these different modules to create your own hybrid synth unique to you. And if I want to go back or I make a mistake, Yuhi synths are actually some of the only ones I know with an undo and redo function, so that's very handy. Of course, this is just the start with envelopes, LFOs, transient mode options and onboard effects, so there's lots to get into, and sadly I don't have the time to show everything off here, but I'll do my best. You can assign different models of envelope shaping to the 2 oscillators. There are 4 different transient mode options, stackable voices with per voice tuning, and global drift controls. You'll notice that the pad chords are pretty open, and I like to approach pad writing a bit like strings, with lots of space between the lower notes and less in the upper range. This just helps the chords to breathe. Diva has lots of FX patches, and this one is a nice example, using the maximum cross mod setting to make oscillator 1 modulate oscillator 2 very quickly. I'm also using Twang Strom, Yuhi's spring reverb effect, to place the sound in the mix. The preset RCH Dawn Patrol is great for this, with the width, drive and decay turned up to about 1 o'clock to make the effect stand out. Of course, there are lots more presets and parameters, even a control here which lets you shake the virtual spring tank. And this can be assigned to LFO, envelope or pretty much any other parameter. It's very flexible. I needed an undulating yet repetitive bass line for the second part of my track. Yuhi's Repro 1 is perfect for this. It's a dual oscillator mono synth with built-in arpeggiator and sequencer functions, and it's got some really nice sounding stomp box effects. Modelled on the famous Pro 1 from Sequential Circuits, this synth is really a synth to program. It comes with over 500 presets, and I've used the preset CK First Bass here, changed some of the oscillator wave shapes, turned off the glide mode, and reduced the cutoff. Many of the controls here are self-explanatory, but do check out this cool Tweaks tab which removes the synth's cover, exposing the circuit board for adjusting individual modules' behaviour. So the changes I've made give a more subby tone. I've also activated the Jaws wave folder stomp box in the effects menu, which is a type of wave shaper effect, folding the waveform back on itself multiple times. I've dialed it down from the default settings for just a little bit of bite. There's an entire sequencer section too, way more involved than the original hardware, so I've used this to program a 4-step sequence of velocity and pitch. The first bass line in the track is derived from a classic patch, again using Repro 1. It's a kind of re-space sound. Now what I want is a low throbbing tone, and this is far too aggressive at the moment. In the effects rack I'll turn off the Jaws wave folder, which knocks the bite out of the sound, really bringing it back to its roots. I've also reduced the filter cutoff in the performance panel, and that mellows the sound. Setting the amp attack and release to around 75 gives the sound a slow intro and outro. And as it plays through, I ride the mod wheel to subtly open the filter cutoff. Yuhi's Repro 5 synth is modelled on the Prophet 5, the first fully programmable polyphonic analog synth. Repro 5 can play up to 8 voices, so it's great for pads and keys. It's got plenty of presets dedicated to those kind of sounds too. I'm using AZ Vega from the orchestral pad selection, which is a little bit too bright for the track. So knocking down the filter cutoff to 25 is perfect. It plays the chords an octave above the pad patch from Diva to add a little sheen. Both of the Repro synths can be used to create some excellent lead sounds, and the interface is pretty simple, so basic changes are right here on the front panel. For example, I can adjust the pitch bend range, the sound has been programmed to tie the filter cutoff to velocity and aftertouch to the mix level of oscillator A. Setting things up like this means I can really get some great expression from playing. Yuhi's Color Copy is an amazing analog delay effect with all the modern advantages of a plugin. It's based on the Lyrebird effect in Repro 1 and 5 that I mentioned earlier, but it's massively extended. So I've used it on this track to give the lead line an even longer delay tail. I've also used Color Copy on some other tracks, along with some of Yuhi's other effects. Just to showcase the power of these, I've taken a percussion hit from Diva, a really simple one, and run it through some of the more experimental presets in Presswerk, Color Copy, and Twangstrum. And that transforms this really basic sound into a wide and spacey phased effect. On the lead track I'm using quite a simple waveform in Diva. I've experimented with the different modules to make quite a sharp sawtooth sound, and then taken the edge off it by utilising Yuhi's Satin Tape Machine plugin. This plugin colours the sound and adds some lovely saturation, transient smoothing and compression. Push it hard in vintage mode and you get flutter, hiss and other artifacts associated with tape machines. I'll quickly run through a few more tracks and effects to finish this cue off. All of the synths here have hundreds of recognisable presets, useful as jumping off points for your own sounds. This one in Diva is straight out of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. And I've added some of Yuhi's colour copy delay and Twangstrom spring reverb. Along with some pitch bend programming to help the effect build. Don't forget that the synths have their own built-in effects too. This pretty standard filtered sawtooth sound is transformed with Diva's chorus and plate delay effects. Although it's primarily known as an analog synth, Diva also has a nice collection of digital synth modules and waveforms, and I've used 2 digital waveforms here to create this pluck sound. I want to end by talking about the mastering of this track. It's pretty subtle as I've tried to keep the vintage feel. I've used Yuhi's Presswerk Dynamics processor to glue the tracks together with some parallel compression and a little post-processing saturation. Presswerk actually has over 120 presets covering everything from master bus compression to special effects. Mid-side modes and sidechain options make it a pretty versatile option for musicians that want some character from their compression. iZotope's Ozone 7 is my other weapon of choice here, widening the mids and highs and adding a subtle EQ curve and limiting. So finally, here's the whole track played all the way through. Thanks so much for watching.